A cold gust of wind howled through the narrow alleyway, rattling loose shutters and carrying the distant wail of a siren. Beneath the dim glow of a flickering street lamp, Max, a rugged German shepherd, sat motionless, his amber eyes locked onto the trembling figure of a man. The man's breath came in short, ragged gasps, his fingers curling around the handle of a worn leather bag as if it contained his very life inside. Max didn't move. He didn't need to. He had already understood. What had happened here? What his master, Detective Raymond Cole, had yet to discover. The night was thick with the scent of fear. Blood, sweat, and something else. A lie. A secret buried beneath the city's filth. Max had spent years beside Cole, tracking criminals, uncovering evidence, and following trails no human could. But this was different. This time, Max knew something, before anyone else did. Behind him, footsteps echoed, steady, deliberate. Detective Cole emerged from the shadows, his sharp gaze scanning the scene before settling on Max. The dog's ears twitched, his stance unwavering. "What is it, boy?" Cole muttered, kneeling beside him. His calloused fingers brushed Max's fur, sensing the tension in his companion's body. It was more than a clue. It was an unspoken command. Max's gaze flickered toward the bag. A subtle shift. A silent message. Cole's instincts kicked in. He reached out, gripping the bag's handle and unzipping it. Inside, neatly wrapped in plastic, was a blood-stained glove and a single golden cufflink, one that belonged to a man who had been in court just hours ago, swearing he had nothing to do with a murder. The tension in the air thickened. Max had just exposed a lie without making a sound. Cole exhaled sharply. "Good boy," he whispered, the weight of the discovery sinking in. But the night was far from over. Max knew what came next. And he wasn't ready to let this criminal slip away. The city never truly slept. Even in the dead of night, neon signs flickered, distant car horns blared, and the hum of restless energy filled the air. But amidst all that noise, Max heard only one thing: the steady, calculated footsteps of a man trying to disappear. Detective Cole's fingers tightened around the blood-stained glove, his mind racing. He had spent years in this game, reading people, knowing when someone was hiding something. But Max? Max didn't need intuition, he just knew. The dog's ears twitched, his body tensed. A scent had been caught. Fresh, undeniable. Cole saw it in an instant. "You got something, boy?" Max didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, his powerful frame cutting through the night like a shadow, his nose locked onto a trail. Cole barely had time to react before he was running, following the only partner he had ever trusted with his life. They cut through the alley, past overflowing dumpsters and rusted fire escapes. Max led without faltering, weaving through the city's underbelly, with an urgency that Cole had learned never to question. And then a sound, a hurried shuffle. The scrape of a boot against pavement. Max stopped. He had found him. Cole's hand went to his holster. "Come out," he ordered, his voice firm. Silence. Then a figure darted from the shadows. A man in a dark coat, his face masked in fear, his hands clutching nothing but desperation. Max let out a low, rumbling growl. Cole didn't even blink. "Are you going to make this easy, or do I let him handle it?" The man hesitated, his eyes flicking between the detective and the dog. He knew what Max could do. Everyone did. But fear makes people stupid. The man turned to run. Cole sighed. "Bad choice, Max." Moved before Cole even had to say the word. The chase was on. The moment the suspect turned to flee, Max lunged forward, his powerful muscles coiling like a spring, ready to release. Detective Cole barely had time to react, before his partner had already bolted down the alleyway, his paws hitting the pavement in rhythmic, relentless pursuit. The city stretched out before them, like a dark, twisting maze of shadowed streets, towering buildings and hidden alleys. Rain had slicked the roads and the scent of gasoline and damp. Concrete filled the air. The suspect's boots splashed through puddles as he ran, his breath coming in desperate gasps. But Max wasn't desperate. He was determined. Cole sprinted after them, keeping his eyes locked on the unfolding chase. His heart pounded, but he trusted Max more than he trusted his own instincts. The dog had never failed him before. Ahead, the suspect made a sharp turn into a narrow side street, weaving between dumpsters and abandoned shopping carts. He was fast, but Max was faster. A hunt in the dark. Max's claws scraped against the wet pavement as he adjusted his trajectory. His sharp nose had already memorized the man's scent, locking onto it like a heat-seeking missile. This wasn't just a chase, this was a hunt. Cole followed, leaping over a broken fence, his badge swinging from his belt. "Max, cut him off!" he shouted, knowing the dog didn't need the command. Max had already figured it out. Instead of following directly, Max took a shortcut, veering left through a stack of crates. His lean, muscular frame allowed him to squeeze through spaces a human never could. And then he saw it. The suspect had reached a dead end. A tall, rusted chain-link fence blocked the way, topped with jagged coils of barbed wire. The man skidded to a stop, his chest heaving, panic flashing across his face. He turned, realizing too late that he was trapped. And then he saw Max. A dark shadow. A pair of piercing amber eyes. A silent force of justice. The man scrambled backward. "No, no, no, no!" Max didn't growl. He didn't bark. He didn't need to. His mere presence sent a chill down the suspect's spine. Cole arrived a second. Later, gun drawn but steady. "Game over," he said, his voice cold and final. The suspect hesitated, his fingers twitching at his sides. His eyes flickered toward the fence, calculating the impossible climb. Cole narrowed his gaze. "I wouldn't try it," he warned. "You won't make it halfway before he drags you down." Max took a single step forward, his massive frame tensed. The suspect swallowed hard, and then he dropped to his knees, raising his hands in surrender. Max didn't move. He stood still, watching, ensuring the threat was over. Cole holstered his weapon and pulled out his cuffs. As he secured the suspect's wrists, he let out a slow breath. Another case closed. Another chase won, all thanks to Max. Cole looked down at his partner, reaching out to scratch behind his ears. "Good boy." Max had never needed words. His actions spoke louder than anything. Back at the precinct, the air was thick with the scent of stale coffee, inked paperwork, and sweat. The station never truly slept. Phones rang, officers moved from desk to desk, and the occasional distant slam of a cell door echoed through the halls. But Detective Cole had his focus elsewhere. He stood behind the two-way mirror of Interrogation Room 3, watching through the glass as the suspect sat slumped in his chair. A man named Victor Langley, a low-level corporate fixer with a history of making problems disappear for the rich and powerful. The golden cufflink found in the bag? That belonged to someone higher up, someone powerful. Max sat at Cole's feet, still silent but fully alert. His presence was a reminder. He had been the one to track Victor down, and now they needed answers. Cole adjusted his tie and stepped into the room. "The game begins." Victor barely glanced up as Cole sat across from him, placing a thick case file onto the metal table. His wrists were still cuffed, and a bead of sweat trickled down his temple. He was trying to act calm, but Max knew better. Cole leaned back in his chair. "You had a good run," he said casually, flipping through the file. "But it ends tonight," Victor scoffed, forcing a weak grin. "I don't know what you're talking about." Cole smirked. "They always said." That without a word, he pulled out the blood-stained glove and the golden cufflink, placing them between them like evidence at an execution. Victor's fake confidence wavered. "You were seen leaving the scene," Cole continued. "You were seen with that bag. And my partner here," he gestured toward Max, who sat patiently beside him, watching, waiting. "He tracked you down like it was nothing." Victor glanced at Max for the first time. A flicker of fear flashed through his eyes. Cole saw it. He leaned forward. "You're not the big fish, Victor, that cufflink. It belongs to someone else, someone who's probably real nervous right now. You were supposed to clean up a mess, weren't you?" Victor's jaw clenched. He didn't answer. Cole sighed, shaking his head. "You know, you've got two choices here. Either you cooperate, or you take the full weight of this yourself." Silence. Then Max moved. Just a small shift, a subtle motion. But Victor flinched as if the dog had lunged at him. The man's hands trembled. Cole noticed. Max had broken him without making a sound. All right, Victor exhaled sharply, eyes darting toward the mirrored glass. He leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. But if I talk, you have no idea who you're up against. Cole's expression didn't change. He had heard that line before, but deep down he had a feeling Victor wasn't lying, and Max could sense the storm coming. The air in interrogation room 3 grew heavier as the seconds stretched into silence. The fluorescent light buzzed faintly overhead, casting long shadows across the dull grey walls. Victor Langley's fingers twitched, his cuffs rattling slightly as he stole a glance toward the two-way mirror. Detective Cole leaned forward, his eyes sharp, unwavering. Max sat still at his side, but his presence was louder than any threat Cole could have made. Victor wasn't afraid of cops, but he was afraid of Max. Cole didn't rush him. He had been here before, this moment, where a suspect balanced between defiance and collapse, between secrets and survival. And then, finally, Victor exhaled. "You don't understand what you're stepping into," he muttered, rubbing his wrist against the cold steel of the cuffs. "This isn't some small-time operation. The guy who owns that cufflink?" He shook his head. "He's untouchable." Cole lifted an eyebrow. "No one's untouchable." Victor let out a dry chuckle, his eyes dark with something dangerously close to defeat. "That's what the last guy said before he disappeared. The name that changed everything." Cole stayed quiet. He had learned that silence was sometimes the best weapon. People hated silence. It made them nervous, it made them fill the space. And Victor did exactly that. He leaned in slightly, his voice low, as if someone other than Cole and Max could hear him. Elias Crown. The moment the name left his lips, the room itself seemed to tighten around them. Cole kept his face blank, but his heart beat a little faster. Elias Crown. A name that didn't just carry weight, it carried bodies. A billionaire with real estate, empires, political ties, and a web of businesses that stretched into places no law enforcement could ever fully reach. Crown was the kind of man who never appeared in courtrooms, never left fingerprints, never got his hands dirty, because he had people like Victor Langley to do it for him. Cole leaned back in his chair. "And what exactly were you cleaning up for Elias Crown tonight?" Victor hesitated. He opened his mouth, and then the bullet that ended it. All bang. A single gunshot shattered the silence. The glass behind Cole cracked in a web-like explosion. The sharp whistle of a suppressed shot was all the warning they got. Before chaos erupted, Cole moved on instinct, flipping the table over as a shield. Down! But Max was already moving. Before Cole could even fully process what had happened, Max launched himself forward, toward Victor. Another bullet, it hit the chair where Victor had been sitting just seconds before. But Victor wasn't breathing anymore. Blood trickled from a small, precise hole between his eyes, a perfect kill shot. Cole's stomach tightened. Sniper, professional, clean, no second chances. Max snarled, his body coiled like a loaded spring, ears twitching as he tracked a scent through the shattered glass. Footsteps. Someone was leaving, fast. Cole barely hesitated. "Go!" Max leaped over the table, past the broken mirror and into the hallway. His paws thundered against the floor, his instincts locked onto the assassin trying to escape. Cole was right behind him, gun drawn. They weren't just chasing a killer anymore. They were chasing the shadow of Elias Crown himself, and Max wasn't going to let them get away. The precinct hallways were chaos. Officers scrambled, weapons drawn, shouting orders as the realization hit. Someone had just executed a suspect inside the station. But Cole didn't have time to think about that. His focus was on Max. The second the shot had been fired, Max had locked onto something, a scent, a presence, an unseen threat that most men wouldn't notice until it was too late. And now he was in pursuit. Cole sprinted after him, heart hammering in his chest. Whoever had pulled that trigger was fast, but Max was faster. The shadow in the station Max tore through the hallway, his nails scraping against the floor as he pivoted around a corner. His breaths were sharp, controlled, his entire body a weapon of instinct and precision. Cole followed, gun up, scanning every doorway, every shadow. Then, a glimpse, a dark figure slipping through the emergency exit at the end of the corridor. The assassin. Cole shouted, "Max, get him!" The door slammed open. Cold night air rushed in as Max lunged through the exit and into the dimly lit alleyway behind the station. The scent was stronger now. Gunpowder, sweat, leather. The assassin wasn't far. Cole hit the pavement, eyes darting. The alley stretched into the city, a labyrinth of dumpsters, fire escapes, and flickering streetlights. And then, movement. Max's ears snapped forward. There, a shadow moving along the chain-link fence. The assassin was running, a deadly chase through the city. Cole bolted forward, gun aimed. Freeze! The figure didn't stop. Max charged. The assassin veered left, trying to lose them through the maze of alleys. But Max had the killer's scent. Now. There was no escaping him. The figure leaped over a dumpster, vaulting onto a low fire escape. Cole fired a warning shot into the air, but the assassin didn't slow down. Instead, they jumped. From the fire escape, the assassin leaped across the alley toward the rooftop of the next building. Cole cursed under his breath. They were trained. Military? Special ops? A professional killer. But they weren't the only predator in this chase. Max didn't hesitate. In a single powerful bound, he leaped onto the dumpster, then sprang toward the fire escape. His claws scraped metal, his muscles coiled. And before the assassin could climb further, Max launched himself, a blur of fur and power. The assassin turned just in time to see 100 pounds of muscle and teeth colliding with their chest. They crashed onto the rooftop. The assassin twisted, trying to fight back, but Max was already on top of them, teeth bared, growl deep and threatening. Cole reached the rooftop seconds later, gun trained. "Don't move," he ordered, breath heavy. The assassin froze, Max's teeth inches from their throat. Cole stepped closer, steadying his aim. He had questions. And now, he was going to get some answers. Because tonight, they weren't just chasing a killer, they were hunting whoever Elias Crown had sent to clean up his mess. And Max? Max never let his prey escape. The rooftop was eerily quiet, save for the faint hum of the city below. Neon lights flickered from distant billboards, casting long, shifting shadows across the gravel-covered rooftop. Cole stood over the fallen assassin, gun steady, his breath controlled. Max loomed just inches away, his growl low and constant, his sharp teeth mere moments from ending the assassin's life. The figure beneath them didn't struggle. Instead, they lay still, chest rising and falling in measured breaths, like someone who had been in this position before, like someone who wasn't afraid of dying. Cole took a step closer, eyes scanning the assassin's gear. All black, tactical gloves, a bulletproof vest under a fitted jacket. No ID, no insignia. But the way they moved, the way they had almost escaped, this was no ordinary hitman. Cole aimed his gun directly at their head. "Who sent you?" The assassin turned slightly, revealing piercing blue eyes beneath a black mask. And then, to Cole's surprise, they smirked. A familiar face. With a slow, deliberate motion, the assassin lifted one gloved hand and tugged the mask down. A woman. Sharp features. A long scar along her jaw and a gaze that felt like it could slice through steel. Cole's stomach twisted. He knew her. Agent Hart. His voice was cold, but his mind was racing. "You're supposed to be dead," she smiled, her voice dripping with amusement. "So are you," Cole clenched his jaw. "You work for Crown now?" Hart exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "I don't work for anyone, but I had a job to do." Her eyes flicked toward Max, who hadn't moved an inch, muscles tensed, ready to tear into her at any sign of resistance. "Call off your dog, Cole. You and I both know how this is going to end." Cole didn't lower his gun. "You executed a suspect in a police station. That's not just a job, that's cleaning up a mess." Hart's smirk faltered. For a brief second, something unreadable flashed across her face. Regret. No? Something else. She tilted her head, studying him. Victor was dead the second Crown realized he might talk. "I just made sure it was quick." The weight of a name. Cole took a slow breath. Elias Crown had officially made his move. A billionaire, who didn't just operate in the shadows, he owned them. If he was willing to kill inside a police station, then the case Cole had walked into wasn't just dangerous anymore. It was a death sentence. And now, Hart was the first real lead he had. Cole lowered his gun slightly. "You didn't kill me when you had the chance," he said, "which means you have something to say, so talk." Hart's lips pressed into a thin line. Then she sighed. "You have no idea what you've stepped into, Cole. Crown doesn't just eliminate threats, he erases them." She leaned in slightly. "And after tonight, you and your dog, you're next." Max let out a low growl. A warning. Cole met Hart's gaze, his voice steady. "Let him try." Because now, this wasn't just about solving a murder anymore. This was about bringing down Elias Crown himself, and nothing was going to stop them. Not even the ghosts of Cole's past. The cold steel of the handcuffs felt heavier on Cole's wrist than it ever had before. He'd been here before, backed into a corner with his back against a wall. But this time the stakes were higher. The game wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about survival. Hart's confession was echoing in his mind like a distant drumbeat. Crown was no ordinary criminal. He was a ghost, an elusive shadow who controlled more than Cole had ever imagined. And now, his power had stretched into the heart of law enforcement itself. As Cole walked down the dimly lit hallway of the precinct, Max at his side, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. There was something off in the air, a gnawing sense of urgency that made his every step feel heavy. Max's ears twitched. He too felt it. Cole stopped, motioning for Max to stay close. He could feel his heartbeat in his throat, the pressure building as the doors to the chief's office loomed ahead. This wasn't a conversation he wanted to have, but it was one he had to. He stepped inside, and the air seemed to freeze. The chief's secret chief, Reynolds, sat at his desk, staring down at a stack of papers. His face was tired, lines etched into his skin that spoke of sleepless nights and impossible decisions. But there was something else in his eyes now. A shift, a subtle, almost imperceptible change in the way he looked at Cole. "Sit down, Cole," Reynolds said, his voice steady. Cole didn't move. His eyes narrowed. "I'm not here to chat." Reynolds sighed, rubbing his temples. "I know what you're going to say, and I know you're angry. But what you don't know is, you've been compromised." Cole's words were blunt, cutting through the tension. He leaned forward, watching Reynolds closely. "Crown's bought you, hasn't he?" Reynolds didn't flinch. His eyes held something dark, guilt, shame, but no regret. "It's not that simple, Cole. Crown owns everyone who's worth owning." He stood up, walking over to the window. "And I'm not proud of it, but I've been trying to keep this department standing. You think Crown doesn't have eyes everywhere?" Cole's mind raced. He couldn't let the chief talk his way out of this. "So you've been covering up his operations, letting him run his business right under your nose." Reynolds' shoulders slumped. "I'm trying to protect you. You have no idea how deep this goes. The moment you started asking questions about Crown, that's when you signed your death warrant. The choice of a lifetime." The weight of Reynolds' words hit Cole like a freight train. Crown's reach was infinite. More than just influence. It was power. And now Cole was tangled in it. There was no getting out. There was no turning back. Max's growl interrupted the tension, a low rumble from his chest as he locked eyes with the chief. Max didn't trust Reynolds, and Cole didn't either. Cole stood still, his mind working. "What about Hart?" Reynolds didn't answer at first, his fingers tapping the edge of the window as he stared out at the dark sky. Finally, he spoke, but his voice was strained. "She was supposed to be dead. She's a ghost from your past, Cole, and now she's working for Crown." Max let out a sharp bark, and Cole looked at him, reading the intensity in the dog's eyes. They both knew what needed to be done. "So what's the plan, Chief?" Cole asked, his voice hardening. "We just let Crown walk free, let him destroy everything we've built?" Reynolds turned slowly, meeting his gaze. "You don't have a choice. No one does. Crown's everywhere." Cole's fists clenched. He couldn't accept that. He wouldn't accept that. Before he could respond, the doors burst open. A uniformed officer stood in the doorway, eyes wide, breath coming in short gasps. "Sir!" the officer shouted. "We have a problem. It's Crown's people. They're here. In the building." The words hit like a sucker punch. Crown had already moved. Cole didn't think. He acted. "Get to the car now," he ordered Reynolds. "We're getting out of here. This is bigger than just you and me. But as they ran toward the exit, Cole realized something. They weren't just running from Crown's men. They were running from the truth, the chase for survival. Outside, the night was colder than ever. The city was alive, blaring horns, the distant wail of sirens, the hum of 1,000 lives continuing without knowing the war happening just below the surface. Cole reached the car first, but Max wasn't far behind. The dog's eyes were sharp, scanning the area for danger. They knew time was running out. As Cole slid into the driver's seat, he glanced at Reynolds, who had settled beside him. "Where do we go from here?" Reynolds asked, voice shaking. Cole's hands tightened around the wheel. "We don't have the luxury of asking questions anymore. We find Crown and we make him pay." And with that, the hunt resumed. The night was alive with the hum of the city, but for Cole it felt suffocating. He'd been running on adrenaline for too long, chasing shadows and fighting battles he'd never signed up for. But now, as the streets blurred around him, the only thing that mattered was getting to Crown. Reynolds sat in the passenger seat, his hands clenching and unclenching, visibly sweating. He knew what was coming, the final confrontation. But even as the tension thickened, Cole couldn't ignore the weight on his shoulders. He was walking into the lion's den and there was no way out. They had lost their element of surprise. Crown's men were already in motion, closing in on them. The city was his playground. Every alley, every building, every street corner had been designed for people like him. People who never had to worry about the law. Cole's grip tightened on the steering wheel as they sped through the narrow streets. Max's head was low, his eyes sharp, scanning for any sign of movement. The dog knew what they were up against. "There's no safe place, is there?" Reynolds asked quietly, breaking the silence. Cole didn't answer. The truth was he wasn't sure anymore. Safe places were for people who had time to look for them. They didn't have time. Not anymore. A sharp turn took them down a dimly lit alley, one that Cole recognized from his time in the force. It was a dead end, but it was also the perfect place to disappear, a location Crown's men wouldn't expect. Cole knew they had to make their stand here. The trap closes. In the moment the car skidded to a stop, Max was out of the door, moving with the fluid precision of a predator. Cole followed, his gun ready, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Reynolds, though clearly terrified, had no choice but to follow. They made their way through the alley, the shadows playing tricks on their eyes. Every step felt heavier, the air colder. And then there was the click of a gun followed by a cold voice. "Turn around, Cole. You don't have to do this." Cole froze. His heart skipped a beat. The voice was unmistakable. "Heart." She stepped out. Of the shadows, gun in hand, eyes narrowed. Her scarred face was unreadable, but her stance, calm, controlled, told him everything he needed to know. "Where's Crown?" Cole demanded, not moving an inch. Hart's lips quirked into a ghost of a smile. "That's what I've been trying to tell you." Before he could react, the sound of footsteps echoed from both sides of the alley. Several men in dark suits emerged, their weapons drawn. Cole's heart hammered in his chest. They were surrounded. "We didn't want it to come to this," Hart said softly. "But you've made your choice. You're a liability now, Cole." Cole's mind raced. He was outnumbered, cornered, and with Crown's men closing in, there was no way out. His instincts screamed to fight, but in his heart, he knew the truth. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about stopping Elias Crown, no matter the cost. Max growled low, his muscles coiling as he watched Hart's every movement. But Cole had a choice to make, and he didn't have much time. "You don't have to follow him, Hart," he said, trying one last time to reach her. "This isn't you." For a moment, Hart's eyes flickered, just a brief flash of something that resembled regret. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the cold, calculating gaze of someone who had already made their decision. "I don't have the luxury of choices anymore, Cole," she said, her voice heavy with the weight of her words. "You're either with him or against him." As she raised her gun, Cole's hand flew to his own, his finger itching to pull the trigger. But before he could move, the sound of an explosion erupted from the far side of the alley. The blast sent the men on either side of Cole flying, debris raining down. The shockwave rocked the alley, but Cole didn't hesitate. In the chaos, he dashed forward, knocking Hart's gun from her hand and sending her sprawling to the ground. "Move!" Cole shouted to Reynolds, who had been frozen in place. "Get to the car now." Max was already ahead, his instincts guiding him through the smoke and chaos. The remaining men were disoriented, but Cole knew it wouldn't last long. They had only seconds before Crown's people regrouped, the betrayal as they sprinted toward. The car. Cole saw movement in the corner of his eye. Another figure, a shadowy silhouette, emerged from the darkness. His heart skipped a beat as the figure stepped forward, revealing a familiar face. It was Reynolds, but it wasn't the same Reynolds. In the blink of an eye, the chief's hand was on Cole's shoulder, pushing him down. The force of the shove sent Cole sprawling onto the cold ground. He looked up to see Reynolds, a twisted smile on his face. "You were always a pawn, Cole," Reynolds said coldly. "Crown owns you. You just didn't know it until now." Cole's mind was in chaos as he tried to regain his footing. The man who had once been his ally was now his enemy. And in that moment, Cole realized the full extent of the betrayal. The entire precinct, every officer he had ever trusted, they were all under Crown's control. Reynolds stepped back, his hands raised in mock surrender. "This is the end, Cole. There's nowhere to run." But as the man approached, a sudden bark from Max tore through the air. The dog lunged at Reynolds, knocking him off balance. The next few moments were a blur. Cole grabbed his gun and fired, one shot straight to the heart. Reynolds dropped to the ground, his lifeless eyes staring up at the sky. Max, bloodied but unscathed, stood over him, his chest heaving with effort. Cole didn't have time to mourn. He grabbed Reynolds' radio, his fingers trembling. "Hart! We have to move now! Crown knows we're here!" As the sound of sirens filled the air, Cole realized that this was only the beginning. They had just exposed the first layer of a much darker truth, and now there was no turning back. The war had begun. The air had thickened with tension, and the darkness of the alley now seemed like the perfect backdrop for the battle that was about to unfold. Cole stood still, breathing heavily, his heart pounding as he looked at the lifeless body of Reynolds. The betrayal had cut deeper than any bullet could. His former ally was now just a shadow, a casualty of the war that had been silently brewing beneath the city for years. But the weight of Reynolds' death didn't have the time to sink in. The sirens were growing louder. Crown's men were on their way, and Cole knew they had to leave now before they were boxed in. There was no more room for hesitation. There was no plan and B. Max growled low, his hackles raised, as though sensing the impending danger. Cole's eyes darted around, searching for a way out. But all the streets were being swallowed by the approaching chaos. Their only option was to fight their way out, and that meant taking on Crown's entire operation head-on. Hart hadn't followed them, but Cole knew she would be in the thick of it. The question that haunted him now wasn't about surviving. It was about who would be left standing when the dust settled. Just as Cole turned to head toward the car, a figure emerged from the shadows. It wasn't Hart, but a tall, imposing man in a black suit, the kind of person who had seen too many deaths to care about anymore. He was flanked by two armed guards, their faces obscured by the shadows. Cole's gut twisted. He didn't need to see the man's face to recognize him. Elias Crown. "You've made it this far, Cole." Crown's voice was smooth, almost mocking. "But you've reached the end of the line." Cole stood tall, his hand still gripping his gun. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about ending it all, the corruption, the lies, the shadow that had been hanging over the city. "Why do you do this, Crown?" Cole asked, his voice filled with a mix of anger and exhaustion. "What's the point of all this power if it only leads to destruction?" Crown chuckled, the sound cold and detached. "Power isn't about destruction, Cole. It's about control. And the sooner you understand that, the easier this will be for you." Max stepped forward, his body poised, ready to defend. His fur bristled, his instincts sharper than ever. The standoff felt like it could last an eternity. Cole's thoughts raced, trying to process his options. He could fight, but at what cost? Or he could try to get out of there with Max and Hart. But escaping Crown's clutches had never been a simple task. "You've already lost," Crown continued, his cold eyes narrowing. "I own this city. I always have." Before Cole could respond, a faint sound, footsteps, caught his attention. Several more figures emerged from behind the buildings. They weren't guards, they weren't just criminals. They were law enforcement, and they weren't on Cole's side. His heart sank as he saw the badge on the officer's chest. It was a symbol of the same betrayal that had already cost him everything. "Don't fight it," the officer said, his voice hollow. "There's nowhere to run." Cole's eyes flickered to the side, and for just a moment his gaze met Max's. The bond between them was undeniable, an unspoken agreement that no matter what, they would face this together. Max barked once, loud and clear, a command that echoed in the alley. Cole felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as his body went into autopilot. He was going to fight, not for his own survival, but for something far greater, the truth that Crown had buried beneath his empire of lies. Before anyone could make another move, Max lunged with a speed that no one anticipated. He was a blur of motion, knocking one of Crown's guards to the ground with ease. The second guard, startled, pulled his weapon, but Max was too fast, dodging the bullets as if he had been born for this. Cole followed Max's lead, drawing his gun and firing at the nearest officer. The shot rang out in the alley, followed by the sound of a body hitting the ground. There was no room for hesitation. Cole had no choice but to fight through the storm, even as the odds stacked higher against him. The chaos unfolded in slow motion, the clash of metal, the sounds of desperation, the crackle of gunfire. Cole moved with purpose, but even with Max at his side, it was clear that the fight was only going to get harder. Hart, who had been lying in wait, finally made her move. She emerged from behind a pile of debris, a gun in hand, and aimed it directly at Crown. But as she squeezed the trigger, another shot rang out, and Hart collapsed to the ground. Cole's heart stopped. "No!" he screamed, but it was too late. Hart's body crumpled on the cold pavement, her eyes locked in a final silent plea. Crown's laughter rang through the alley, cruel and unrelenting. "You think you can stop me, Cole? It's over. This is my city, and I own it all, including you." Cole didn't hear him anymore. All he could see was Hart, her blood staining the ground. He pushed through the pain, the anger, and the heartbreak. Max was still fighting, his jaws snapping at anyone who dared get too close. Cole, his hands trembling with fury, took aim at Crown, his finger tightening around the trigger. "You were never going to win this, Cole," Crown said one last time. The world seemed to hold its breath. Cole's eyes burned with purpose as he stepped forward. With a deep, final breath, he pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, hitting its mark. Crown's body jerked once, then crumpled to the ground, his eyes wide open in disbelief. The silence that followed was deafening. Cole stood there, his gun still raised, his body trembling from the aftermath of the fight. The city had just lost, its most powerful villain, but the cost had been staggering. Max panted beside him, the dog's fur matted with blood, but his loyalty unwavering. Cole dropped to his knees beside Hart's body, his heart heavy with grief. They had won, but at what price? The war was over, but in the end, there were no true winners. As the sounds of sirens filled the air, Cole looked up at the night sky, the darkness finally lifting. The city could breathe again, but for Cole and Max, there was only the silence that remained, the silence of loss and the weight of what they had sacrificed for it.